It was a regular Friday afternoon in the Tarzana neighborhood of Los Angeles, one of those quiet, sun-baked streets where nothing much happens and neighbors prefer it that way. Then, just after 4 p.m. on May 2nd, 2026, that quiet cracked. Police received a call about a shooting that had just occurred near a residence in Tarzana, and within minutes, squad cars were rolling in. Officers from the Los Angeles Police Department responded to reports of gunfire just after 4 p.m., and what they found was not the dramatic life-or-death crime scene the early headlines made it sound like. But by then, the damage to one man's name had already started, and that man wasn't even outside. The house in question belongs to Chris Brown. The R&B singer has lived in Tarzana for a while, and anyone who follows celebrity, real estate, or entertainment news probably knows the neighborhood as the kind of place artists park themselves when they want some distance from the chaos of central LA. It's residential, it's relatively low-key, and it's exactly the sort of address you'd want if you were trying to stay out of trouble. The irony is that trouble still found its way to the front gate, only this time, Chris Brown himself had nothing to do with it. According to the LAPD, the suspect and victim became involved in a dispute, and that's when the suspect pulled out a CO2-style handgun and fired at the victim. That detail, the CO2-style handgun, matters more than most early reports let on. Authorities emphasized the weapon involved was not a traditional firearm. A CO2-style handgun fires plastic projectiles, which is a significant distinction when you're talking about criminal charges and public perception. The word shooting spread fast. Clarification that it wasn't a real gun traveled much slower, as these things tend to do. So who was the man at the center of this? The suspect, Markeith Kunjis, has worked as a private security guard for more than a decade. He's 35 years old, not a random guy off the street. Kunjis's LinkedIn profile lists his occupation as head of estate security for a private family and indicates that he has worked various security jobs since at least 2013. This is a man whose entire professional identity is built around protecting people and their property. And on this particular Friday afternoon, he was stationed at Chris Brown's Tarzana home, doing exactly that job, when a woman showed up uninvited. The situation started when a woman showed up near the property and was asked to leave, something that happens often, with random women regularly showing up at Chris Brown's place. That's not an unusual thing for a celebrity of Brown's level. Fans show up at stars' homes more often than most people realize, and security guards deal with it constantly. Most of the time, these situations get handled with a firm word and the person leaves. This time, it didn't go that way. According to sources, the woman refused to leave, and things quickly escalated into a heated argument at the front gate. Then it got physical, or at least that's what Kunjis claims.
The woman who called the shooting in said that a black man around 35 years old fired shots at her vehicle. This happened outside of Chris Brown's home.
Sources say the woman got into her vehicle and drove over the guard's foot, and that's when he fired. From his perspective, he'd been physically assaulted, and he responded. From the woman's perspective, and from the perspective of the law, a man just shot at her car, and she needed help. The woman called the police. Claiming the man fired his gun at the vehicle, officers arrested the guard, identified as 35-year-old Markeith Kunjis, who faces an assault with a deadly weapon charge. Bail was set at $50,000. Notably, he was booked on suspicion of discharging a weapon and possession of a weapon in an assault with a deadly weapon case. Kunjis was booked at the Valley Jail section at the Van Nuys station in Los Angeles around 8:30 p.m. local time on Friday.
Assault with a deadly weapon and vandalism. It's not clear if Chris Brown knows either the woman.
According to jail records, he was released on bond around 12:40 a.m. on Saturday, so within hours he was back out. The investigation, however, was not finished. No one was injured, which is a fact worth keeping front and center. A CO2 gun was fired at a vehicle, the car took damage, no person was hit, no one went to the hospital, but headlines ran with shooting outside Chris Brown's home, and the internet did what it always does, ran with it faster than the facts could catch up. Now, enter Chris Brown, who by all accounts was inside his house the entire time this played out on the street in front of it. When the reports started circulating on social media that Saturday, Brown didn't stay quiet. Taking to social media, He shut down speculation, tying him to the incident, insisting he was unaware that anything had even happened. His Instagram story was direct. He wrote, "At this point, this pattern is old. I'm looking at the news like the rest of y'all wondering when and where the hell this happened. I've been in my crib this whole time. Ain't heard a gunshot, police car, or anything. Don't attach my name to none of the bullsh *t. That post tells you a few things about where Chris Brown's head is at right now. He's not trying to address this. He's annoyed. There's a visible frustration in every word of that message. The kind that comes from someone who feels like the same script keeps getting run on them. And looking at the timeline of events surrounding this incident, it's hard not to understand where that frustration comes from. He had just dropped a new song, Fallen, with Leon Thomas the same day of the alleged incident around his home. Earlier that week, he and partner Jada Wallace announced the birth of their first child together, his fourth. He was, by any measure, in one of the better weeks of his personal and professional life. New music dropping, a baby just born, a tour on the horizon. And instead of those things leading the conversation about him, it was a shooting outside his gate that had nothing to do with him. The LAPD's own Public Information Office confirmed to TMZ that the male arrested was not Chris Brown and that it is assumed he was not home at the time, nor did this incident involve him at all. Officials also noted the shooting did not take place inside the residence or on the actual property, but rather on the street outside the home. That's the police themselves saying Chris Brown had no involvement, and yet his name led every article. The comparison to Rihanna's situation wasn't lost on people either. The incident came after a shooting at Rihanna's house in March. Rihanna's home in Beverly Glen was struck by actual gunfire while she was reportedly inside, a genuinely alarming situation. That's a different thing entirely. Because the two incidents happened within weeks of each other, and both involve major R&B artists with homes in Los Angeles, media outlets bundled them together in a way that made Brown's situation seem far more dangerous and personal than it actually was. One involved real gunfire and a real target. The other involved a CO2 gun and a dispute between a security guard and an uninvited woman that had nothing to do with the homeowner. Plenty of fans agreed that people needed to fall back off him, while others pointed out that things always seem to pop up when he's about to get to work. That observation from his fan base isn't just loyalty talking. Brown has been through enough public controversy over the years that some of his supporters have developed a kind of pattern recognition. The timing here did raise eyebrows. His album, titled Brown, was set to drop on May 8th, just days after this incident. Brown recently announced that he will soon embark on a co-headlining tour with Usher to promote his upcoming album. It's a big moment for him professionally. That said, the incident itself was very real, and the fallout from it moved quickly. Once it became clear that the man who fired the CO2 gun was part of Brown's own security detail, the story took a new turn. Sources confirmed to TMZ that Kungis was part of Brown's security staff and had been stationed at the home when the incident unfolded, but is no longer part of the team following the arrest. He was fired, swiftly and without any public statement from Brown's camp. Just gone. That decision makes sense from a practical standpoint. Whatever Kungis's reasoning was, whether the woman actually did run over his foot, whether he felt genuinely threatened, a security guard's job is to de-escalate, not to pull out a weapon and fire it on the street in front of his employer's house. He says she drove over his foot. She says he shot at her car. The legal process will sort out which version holds up and whether his claim of provocation carries any weight under California law. What's clear right now is this. Law enforcement clarified that the weapon involved was not a traditional firearm, but an air-powered device, and officers arrived around 4:11 p.m., spoke to both parties, and took the suspect into custody at the scene. The response was thorough and professional. They didn't just cart someone off, they interviewed both people, assessed the scene, and made a determination. The arrest was made. The bail was set. And then Kungis was cut loose from his job before the night was over. A man fired a non-lethal air gun during an argument outside a celebrity's property. Nobody got hurt. The actual homeowner was inside, uninvolved, and didn't even know it had happened until he saw it trending. The person who fired the weapon was arrested, processed, bailed out, and fired from his job. all within about 8 hours. The woman who was the victim had her car damaged. Those are the facts. What the public got instead was a wall of headlines using the word shooting in the same sentence as Chris Brown's name, alongside images of squad cars and police tape. A man being arrested outside a celebrity's home is news, but the framing matters. Brown seems to understand this dynamic better than most, probably because he's lived inside it for years. When he went on Instagram and said, "This pattern is old," he wasn't talking about this one incident. He was talking about the broader, years-long experience of having his name attached to situations first and facts attached second, right or wrong about any individual case. That frustration is real, and it was on full display in that post. With Brown currently focused on his upcoming tour and new music rollout, he's making it clear he's staying out of the drama, and that posture, head down, keep working, seems to be exactly what he's committed to. The album, the tour with Usher, the new baby at home. Those are the things he said he's got to do when he closed out that Instagram story with, "I got shit to do." Not the most refined way to make a point, but it's honest. The Tarzana incident will get sorted out through the courts. Markeith Cungus will have to answer for what happened on that street. The woman whose car got hit deserves to have her situation taken seriously, and the legal process is where that happens. Chris Brown sitting inside his house while all of this went down outside his gate doesn't make him part of the story. It just makes him the neighbor with the most recognizable name. That's the thing about fame at a certain level. Your address becomes part of the public record. Your name becomes a search term. And when something happens anywhere near your zip code, the algorithm does the rest. Whether that's fair or not is almost beside the point. It's the reality, and Brown knows it. He's been navigating it for a long time. It was about proximity, perception, and the way a name can become the headline even when it doesn't belong in one. Markeith Cungus fired a CO2 gun outside a gate on a Friday afternoon in Tarzana. That's what happened.